Good morning. Welcome to the AmeriCorps contract webinar. This is for the contract year 2017-18. This is Kat Key, and I serve as the National Service Programs Director at Volunteer Florida. And we're so excited that you've joined the webinar. As a couple of tips before we get started, please mute your line, and then you can unmute when you have questions throughout the webinar. Our goal today is to increase your understanding of the overall AmeriCorps contract package and the associated requirements, and then to demonstrate how to access these contract requirements via our grants management system. Joining me today is our Chief Financial Officer, Richard Swartz, Financial Analyst, Tracy Lambright, AmeriCorps Program Managers, Paula DeBoles-Johnson, Jane Atkinson, and Arnold McKay, and our Training and Grants Coordinator, Anitra Thomas. So you've got many of the Volunteer Florida team members here today. Welcome to AmeriCorps. We're so excited to embark on this journey with you this year and delighted about the impact you're going to make in your communities. We're going to cover a lot of material today. We're going to cover your contract and every exhibit, as well as how to access this information on the grant system. We'll be pausing throughout to answer your questions. This contract webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our website, so I'd encourage you to share this link and this information with anybody at your organization that may be also engaged in this contract. So with that, I'm going to begin. Your contract package consists of your 2017-18 AmeriCorps contract and its attachments, which include 12 exhibits. So this entirety is your contract package, and every exhibit is important. So it's critical that you review every exhibit and all of the contract pieces. And that this is something that your grants team and your finance team should also be reviewing. Your AmeriCorps contract package is made up of two sections. Those include the contract terms and conditions, and also other provisions. So I'm going to move through some high-level pieces of your contract right now. We're also going to give you a quick visual about what it looks like so you know what document to refer to. This is the document that you will print off and have executed by your leadership at your organization and return to Volunteer Florida, where we will also execute the contract, and it will be uploaded to the MicroEdge Grants Management System for you to access. So this is your single document that is to be executed by your leadership. And primarily what this includes is your contract terms and conditions that we'll get to in a moment. You'll see the effective date and the termination date. It's a 12-month contract. Your contract allocation consists of your overall total contract amount, your CNCS, federal share, and your grantee provider share. You'll see the contract deductions and withholdings that include the commission fixed fee for administrative costs and your match amount. So those are the dollars to pay attention to in this contract. As you further move through the contract, you'll see information on contract payments, our invoicing process, contract amendments, and contract termination. Under other provisions, you see information related to ownership and sharing of grant products, your point of contact. So your point of contact at Volunteer Florida is also included in this section and was included in the Volunteer Florida award letter. And then the last section you'll see is the contract exhibits, those 12 exhibits. You will provide your information, your program contact, your fiscal contact information, the location where your administrative and fiscal records are housed, and you'll have this document signed and dated and returned via the MicroEdge Grants Management System. We'll talk about dates in just a moment, but this is the primary document that will guide your year. The next document we're going to move into is the contract provisions document. It has two sections, and the contract provision document includes a provider agreement and commission agreement. So we're going to bring up a visual for you on that in just a moment. This is basically the rest of your contract. You'll see a lot of language in here that is related to the AmeriCorps terms and conditions and the requirements for enrolling and managing members. Our first section moves through compliance. You'll see reference to the general grant terms and conditions and the AmeriCorps terms and conditions. That is an exhibit within your contract package, so we'll get to that shortly. But you'll see a lot of reference to those documents as they guide this federal award process. So as moving through the compliance section, you'll note the program name. You've identified a program name. You must keep that name unless you've received approval from Volunteer Florida. You see a section on performance measures and training. So this has to do with the staff positions associated with your grant, your AmeriCorps member recruitment and responsibilities, and the timelines for enrolling AmeriCorps members into the eGrant system, for implementing service, for executing your agreements with your service partners, and some details related to disaster and our role in disaster response in Florida. Primarily, this section is about your AmeriCorps member management. You'll also see a mention of the National Service Criminal History Check. This is one of the most important things to pay attention to throughout your contract year and starting now. There's a couple other points in the contract call that will review this, but what you see here at first is reference to that, to those requirements and a website where you can learn more. You'll also notice as you move through the contract that there's a requirement to complete the National Service Criminal History Check training for one fiscal staff member and one programmatic staff member. That's very important. It's due within 45 days of your contract execution, and it reviews those details for that federal process. I'll say this, if you are charging any individuals to this grant as of August 1st, you need to complete the National Sex Offender Public Registry website check on that individual before any funds can be charged to the grant, cash or, federal or match. So that's something to run today on any of your staff. And the second piece is the FBI and SDLE, state of residency checks, must be initiated prior to the start of work or service. And that's important for both staff and AmeriCorps members. So you must demonstrate initiation of those checks prior to the start of work or service. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So also moving through the contract provisions, there's information on AmeriCorps staff training and AmeriCorps member training. Members are required to have 5 key Volunteer Florida trainings that you'll see identified there. You'll also notice information on budget and match, and I'm going to defer to Tracy Lambright, our financial analyst, to mention some comments there.
Good morning. Just with budget, just to remember that is something that should be a working document for you, and you should be using the approved budget directly from eGrants. That's the budget that we have on file for you and that we'll be watching closely. You should be familiar with your budget. You will want to use this to compare to your actual expenditures on a monthly basis. And you should also share this with your finance staff as well as your program staff. That way everybody's on the same page. Everybody understands where you are, what is allowable, what's not allowable under the grant, what might be in your budget, what might not be in your budget that you want. And you'll need to be comparing both your expenditures and your match on a monthly basis to stay on top of your expenditures, as there is a required match for this grant. Anything with property can be purchased if it is in your budget. If it is not in your budget and it's something that you think will benefit the AmeriCorps program, you can do a budget revision and get the Commission's approval prior to purchasing that. And again, when we talk about property, that is anything that's over $500 that you would use for the AmeriCorps program.
Thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome.
On to planning and program reporting. AmeriCorps programs will report to the Commission, to Volunteer Florida, at mid-year and end of year in designated times. We may request reports from you at other points in the year. The Disability Community Development Plan is also a requirement, and that is your engagement and partnership with other organizations to support inclusion in your AmeriCorps program. A sustainability plan is required for recompete programs, and that is basically how your organization would sustain some of these activities. And then in other reports, Section 8, you'll see that National Criminal History Check training that we referred to, and you'll also see the fiscal online training. These are two required trainings that a program individual and a fiscal individual would complete for all of your organizations. You would upload certification of that training requirement to our grant system. It's due 45 days after the effective date of the contract. Something new this year is that a litmus account access is required, so you'll see information there on how to get a litmus account. It is a Corporation for National and Community Service requirement now for the National Service Criminal History Check training, and we encourage it for the fiscal training. These are great trainings for your team to really understand these two pieces because cost disallowance and many challenges often arise from lack of understanding of either the fiscal and grants management side or the National Criminal History Check requirements. So please pay attention to that. And then we have some information about our financial reports for reimbursement.
Yeah, the financial reports for reimbursement we call as a monthly PER. It is actually going to be Exhibit 7 in your documents, and that invoice is submitted on a monthly basis beginning September 15th for your first invoice, starting with your August 1st start date. So, and then they're due the 15th of the month for every month after that.
Thank you, Tracy. So then, moving through the document, the contract provision document, you'll see language on partnership development and site agreements. Many of you are entering into written agreements with other entities for some of this work, so there's language around those requirements. There's also language related to disaster preparedness, response, recovery, or mitigation. If we experience a disaster in Florida, we often engage our AmeriCorps members in that, so you can refer to that information as well. And moving through there's also information on the training and technical assistance provided by the Commission, the requirement to engage in at least one day of service in one of the CNCF designated national service days, and information on quality assurance and evaluation. Language in there about requiring and documenting your progress made towards your goals, and stakeholder surveys. And then finally, Section N, records and documentation. Language in there around safeguarding information, assigning of contracts, insurance that may be applicable to your program, and then sponsorship. And just a quick note on sponsorship, as a reminder, Volunteer Florida requires that the Volunteer Florida logo, in addition to the AmeriCorps logo, be included on all member service gear, on all service site signage, and on the organizational website. You'll see language in there on how to refer to Volunteer Florida via any public requests or external affairs requests with engaging the media. And the provider also agrees to notify our external affairs director here at Volunteer Florida when engaging in the media. So those are some primary pieces with this. And the final section is language around reimbursements and site visits. Volunteer Florida does conduct site visits or desk audits on each program each year. The contract is a one-year contract, so you'll see the contract continuation not applicable. It's a one-year contract, and then we work with you on the subsequent year's contracts and e-grant proposals. So that's an overview of the contract provisions and the AmeriCorps contract. I'm going to pause there to see if you all have any questions that we can answer at this point. We'll probably have time to entertain one or two questions, and then we'll move on to the remaining documents. Any questions we can answer?
I have a question. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. We can hear you.
The Disability Community Development Plan, do you have examples of that?
Great question. Thank you so much. We have examples and actual samples for you for all of your required documents. Your AmeriCorps program manager can work with you on that. So there is guidance and sample documents on everything you're creating. So just know that these samples are out there. You'd contact the individual on your contract, your program manager, to help walk you through that. Great question.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Where can we get the logo, the actual artwork of both the AmeriCorps and Volunteer Florida logos to put on all of our sites?
That's a great question. We do have the logos on our website via a sponsorship link, and we can direct you to that. Your program manager can direct you to that, but that artwork is available readily and in many forms for you to use as well. Can I answer one final question before we move on? Okay. I know we are covering a lot of information here. However, our staff is deeply committed to helping all of you with all your startup questions. So you have a point of contact to refer to after this call, where our phones generally start ringing a lot. So feel free to reach out to your staff member to answer any of your questions. Okay. So our next document that we're going to discuss is Exhibit 2. And Exhibit 2 is your approved proposal, your budget, and your budget narrative. And what this is your e-grant application. So we're not showing you a visual here, but this is the foundation of your program year. Please review this document and make sure that others in your organization are familiar with it as well. This document includes your budget narrative, your actual budget, your proposal, and your performance measures. So this is the application you submitted, the budget you submitted, and all activities and fiscal invoices flow out of Exhibit 2. Exhibit 3, we spend a lot of time on National Service Criminal History checks within the National Service community, and that's because they're very important for the safety of your AmeriCorps members and the safety of the vulnerable populations that you serve. So Exhibit 3 is a document that you'll complete that identifies that all of your AmeriCorps members and your staff have completed the 3-part National Service Criminal History check. I will share that there is a new disallowance form and process at the federal level. If the checks are not done on time and if they're not done correctly, there is cost disallowance that is repaid, and it cannot be repaid through federal funds. So we're seeing some changes in the landscape here, and we want to make sure you're well aware of those. So what we'll share is that the NSOPWs, those are the national, they're sex offender checks. They must be completed prior to work or service, including training. So before any staff or AmeriCorps member is receiving a living allowance or a stipend or a wage, they must have this check cleared. And clearance is very easy. It's through a national register. You must make sure that all states and territories are included, that there are no exclusions. And if you get what we would call any hits, any other individuals that come up that are not your staff or member, you'll initial and certify that that is not the person that you're completing the check on. The FBI and state of residence check must also be initiated prior to the start of work or service. And so initiation is important for you to document. As with initiating any new program, you'll be developing your own policies and procedures for program management, and writing down your process and your procedure for the criminal history checks is really important. There are templates and forms and guidance for all of this. So to start off your year right, please move forward with clearing those sex offender checks for all your staff and initiating your FBI and state of residency checks for all your staff. And then you'll do the same before your members start work or service. And if we can move into that form, this is a quick picture of what Exhibit 3 looks like. You'll complete this within 90 days of your contract initiation, and then our staff refers to this document and works with you to cross-check all of the support document you've provided. So what you'll include is an individual's name, their position title, their higher enrollment date, and when the FBI, the sex offender, and the state of residency criminal history checks have been completed. You'll receive much more information on this topic during our face-to-face AmeriCorps training that will happen in October, but we stand by to assist you with this information before then. And when you complete that National Service Criminal History check online, it will be sort of a very detailed look at all of your requirements. Okay. And you'll certify it, you'll sign it, and you'll upload it via our grants management system. I think this is one of the most important things to focus on, whether you are a new program or a returning program, that your policy and your forms are on track for this. Because if they're not done correctly and they're not done on time, there will be cost disallowance, and we want to avoid that as we start our year. Okay, so Exhibit 4 is your AmeriCorps and General Grant Terms and Conditions. This single exhibit is a combination of two documents that are listed. These General Grant Terms and Conditions and AmeriCorps Terms and Conditions are the Corporation for National and Community Services guidance for all recipients of these AmeriCorps funds. They do change from year to year. So if you are a continuing program, it's important that you reread this language as it does change each year. It's important that anyone involved with your AmeriCorps program at your agency be familiar with this, especially your fiscal team, as some of those grant terms and conditions are related. So what we see, key information in this document, it includes prohibited activities, member service agreement requirements, includes information on health care coverage, child care coverage, and other relevant statutes for compliance. What is new this year for the general grant terms and conditions is language on identification of funding. So please be aware of that. The Corporation for National and Community Service has some additional language when you're promoting or explaining your program. There's some new language on how you would identify your federal funding and your match funding. New for the AmeriCorps terms and conditions, you'll see the sections listed. There's new language on child care benefits, on pre-approval of costs, of the e-course and litmus access, which we mentioned previously, and then finally that policy for breach of personally identified information. You'll see that as a requirement for Volunteer Florida a little bit later as we move through our checklist, but it is a policy new this year for all subrecipients to have in place kind of what would happen if there was a breach of personally identified information. This is just a quick visual of what that document looks like. The first section is general grants terms and conditions. And then scrolling through to about page 20, you'll see the AmeriCorps terms and conditions. Each document starts off with what's new. So you'll see the what's new piece in the very beginning, likely in the second page. Thank you. So please do reread that each year. And if you have questions, please ask our team. For things that are new to the field, there's often a lot of questions, and that's fine. No question is a bad question. Okay, our next. So the next is our budget revision request form. This happens sometimes throughout the year when you need to shift and change some of your budgets, and I'd like to invite Tracy to share with you some more details on that.
Okay. We do want to also stress enough how important it is for the program and finance staff to stay familiar with their budget, use it as a working document, on a monthly basis. That will help you foresee any issues that may arise or help you to see where you may need to remove funds. And being able to complete one of these budget revision request forms. The budget revision request form is in Excel, and the formulas are all wonderfully built in for you. So if you look at the budget revision request form, there are 3 sets of columns. You've got the original budget, the budget changes, and the revised budget. In the original budget section, the numbers that you will place in the CNCS and grantee columns will be our budget that is approved in e-grants. Those are the numbers that you will begin with, and those will be in the original budget section. The budget changes section will include any increases or decreases that you're wanting to make to your budget. Please keep in mind that the totals for that section should equal 0. All increases should equal your decreases. And then your revised budget section will automatically calculate everything for you once you've entered in your original and budget changes. Please also keep in mind that the totals at the bottom of the form, so your dollar amounts in the original budget section should also be the same dollar amounts that you end up in your revised budget section. If those do not equal, then we may have to get into where you're wanting to do a contract amendment, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But remember that in the budget changes section, that should equal 0. If you need to do a second revision, because sometimes you might get halfway down the year and realize we may not use purchase all of that property that we wanted, or we've hired some other staff to help us, and we want to move some of those funding around, and you need to do a second request. You will then use the revised budget numbers that were in your first approved budget revision form. Those will now become your original budget numbers. And then you will do the same thing. You will put in your budget changes, increases and decreases, and then you will come up with a second revised budget, which will now become your original budget. Please also keep in mind that there is a deadline, and there are a maximum number of those that can be completed within the year. The total amount of budget revisions that can be submitted are 4, and they all must be received and submitted to us no later than April the 1st, which is the beginning of the 4th quarter.
Thank you, Tracy. We want to also mention when you're completing your budget revision forms, you'll want to articulate in the justification section explaining why you're submitting that budget revision form.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the contract amendment that I briefly spoke about. Contract amendments happen when you want to decrease your CNCS funding or your match share. This is something we do not recommend, and is very, very rare. But it can be done if there are some reasons that needs to happen. If you do need to do a contract amendment, you can do that by requesting that on a budget revision request form to us here at the Commission, and then we'll take the lead in completing the amendment. Please note that this amendment has to be sent to CNCS for their approval, so there is a process and some timing that would take to do that. But just keep in mind staying on track of your budget and watching that and staying in contact with your program manager. Hopefully we can get away from doing contract amendments, but that option is there if you need to. I'm going to move on to the monthly invoice, which is Exhibit 7, as again we call that the PER. I stated that these are due the 15th of each month for the prior month, so your first one will be due 45 days into the contract year, which will be August's invoice, and that due date will be September 15th, and every month after that, each is due on the 15th. Keep in mind in your provisions, it mentions about late invoices where the Commission will reserve the right to forfeit any payments if those become late. And please note that they also should include any supporting documentation for any of the expenditures that you've listed. And the requirement for the CNCS and grantee share requirements are the same. So whatever documentation that we would require for the CNCS share, we also require for match share. Please keep in mind that we would also like you to submit not only a PDF signed and dated version of this, but as well as the Excel version. It just helps finance sometimes when things get scanned in. Some of those 8s look like 6s and 5s look like 3s. So by allowing us to have both copies of those, it helps speed up our review and get those reimbursements out to you as fast as we can. On the PER form itself, just to mention for those new programs, the CNCS column is where you actually will place your the expenditures that you wish to be reimbursed for. The grantee share column is the column in which you're placing your matched items. So when you're filling out this, please keep that in mind that if you're wanting to be reimbursed for the cost, that will go in the CNCS column. And please be sure you sign and date the form. Sometimes we get them and they're not signed and dated, so this can prevent delays in processing your reimbursement where we've got to send this back and get you to send it back to us. So keep that in mind as well. And last but not least on my end here is the property and equipment inventory. This is something that is actually submitted at the end of the contract year with your contract closeout checklist. This is a cumulative listing of all property that was purchased with AmeriCorps funds that is over $500 or more. This would include anything like computers, desktops, laptops, iPads, specific software that was used, anything over $500 per item. That form is actually not shown on the screen at this time, but it's included with the contract checklist, closeout checklist documentation.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Well, I know you're all wondering, what are my action items? And so that's where Exhibit 9 comes in. This language was mirrored for you on our contract email, where you received your link and your contract package as far as what's due by what date. We've also included it as Exhibit 9 here. This is basically your contract checklist. And so August 11th is when you would return your executed 17-18 contract. You would upload this into the MicroEdge Grants Management System, which we will review in just a moment. So all of these activities here are grant requirements. And to fulfill these grant requirements you fulfill them by acting on the requirement in the grants management system. So you will be uploading documents to fulfill these grant requirements. So when we receive your executed contract, that's August 11th, at that same time, you'll complete your vendor EFT authorization form and your W-9, which allows us to move forward with processing payments and reimbursements for you. You'll upload, as applicable, copies of insurance policies for your program. And if we have not received your most recent audit statements, then you'll upload that at that time. Second, your AmeriCorps program startup documents. Those are due also by the end of August 31st. We're currently in the process of reviewing startup documents that many of you have already submitted. So those are important to submit really as soon as you can, because the Volunteer Florida staff reviews and provides approval prior to you bringing on any AmeriCorps members. Due within 45 days of your contract, September 14th, are those 2 trainings, completion of those 2 required trainings, and you would upload that certification into the grants management system. And then due by the end of October is your completed Exhibit 3 and your National Service Criminal History Check support documentation. So you should be completing and initiating and completing those pieces prior, but that is the time with which that documentation is due to Volunteer Florida. And then finally, you'll need to have in place a policy for breaches of personally identified information. Exhibit 9, as I mentioned, is a checklist for you. However, you will sign it and date it and submit it as a grant requirement on October 31st with that last contract startup requirement. So that is kind of one of the most important documents to pay attention to for your teams right now.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
Contracts. Okay, the startup contracts for the site agreements and all that, do we upload those before they've been signed? I mean, what are we supposed to have uploaded by the 11th?
Great question. Can we go back one slide? So by the 11th, that is when you're returning your contract to Volunteer Florida. Also by the 11th is when you're completing your vendor form, your W-9, and any applicable insurance or audit. So that is what's due by the 11th. Your startup documents, your final documents will be uploaded into the grants management system by August 31st. So likely there is some back and forth for many of our programs and our staff in finalizing those documents.
Okay, well, it does. It's just on the portal it says it's due the 11th, and I just wasn't sure, I could get all those signed by the 11th, that's all.
So the startup documents are not signed copies, they're just templates. We're just reviewing your templates. Also, many of you may have significant processes for moving contracts through your agencies. So if you anticipate a delay after August 11th, just contact our team. Okay, so we're going to move on to some of our final exhibits, which are Exhibit 10 and 11. Those are your vendor ESP authorization form, your W-9. Please note these are PDF fillable forms, so you will be able to directly enter in your information in these fillable forms. And then finally, we have a contract closeout checklist. Exhibit 12 is something that you complete at the end of your contract year, and it is a checkoff of a number of items that must be satisfied to close out a contract year. And those include any compliance issues, final expenses and invoicing, information related to AmeriCorps members exiting the portal, things like that. So your contract 12 is available to you now, but it is not due until you're closing out your grant year. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and just share a couple things. First of all, welcome to this amazing movement of national service. We are so excited that you're here with us, that you're part of this movement in Florida that's engaging millions of dollars and thousands of individuals who are really solving community challenges, Florida's most pressing community challenges. So we stand by to assist you in this year. I want to encourage you, again, to read everything that we send you and to really invest in developing your strong written processes and procedures right up front. The next section of our contract webinar is a 10-minute pre-recorded version of how to access our grants management system at Volunteer Florida. So what we're doing now is we're including those detailed instructions on how you can access and respond to your grant requirements. It will play for about 10 minutes, and then we will answer any questions and close the webinar. We're including all of these pieces in one contract webinar for you so that you can later reference it via our website. So before we move into that stage, are there a couple other questions we can answer for you?
I have a quick question on the insurance. Are you wanting the entire policies or just pages?
Can you restate that question?
Are you wanting the entire policy or just the declaration pages?
Our finance team says the policy, the applicable policy.
Okay.
Any other questions we can answer?
Yeah, I have a follow-on to that.
Great, go ahead.
Normally, when somebody wants our insurance, the accord statement is sufficient. Are you saying that's not sufficient?
Yeah, I think it may depend on the policy. So if you can connect with your Volunteer Florida staff on that, but our finance team is saying that we would like to see the entire policy. It may depend on what policy it is.
Thank you.
Kat, it's Steve Chapman. Good morning.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, question with the Exhibit 3, the NSOPW that you shared on the screen. You guys also came out with a form, I want to say in April, that we had to complete. Is that form something that we're still needing to complete, or do you know which one I'm talking about?
I do. Great question. Yes, that form is what we recommended all organizations complete to have a clear record of the dates that various background check components were initiated and satisfied. So we do recommend that programs continue with that one-pager.
So we just don't submit it to you?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question, Kat. If we submitted most of this documentation when we submitted our grant, do we need to resubmit?
Related to your audit and insurance policies, you do not need to resubmit if there have not been any changes. And also if those were the most recent of those policies and audits.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, everyone. Well, we're going to move into our grants management section of the webinar and look forward to sharing with you more about how to access your grant requirements.
Hello and welcome to the MicroEdge training video. Today we will be discussing how to retrieve your 2017-2018 AmeriCorps contract package. Before we begin, please make sure you are accessing the MicroEdge portal in either Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox. As a best practice, please bookmark this link, highlighted above, as it will remain the same throughout the entire grant year. This link will be used to access your contract package and all related requirements throughout the year. The screen that you're looking at is the MicroEdge Volunteer Florida homepage. Again, as a reminder, there's only one email associated per AmeriCorps contract for MicroEdge. If you forgot your password, you can simply press Forgot Password and type in your email here, and MicroEdge will send you a temporary password. This temporary password is good for only 24 hours, and once you log in with that, it will prompt you to create a new password. Again, Volunteer Florida keeps no record of any of the passwords for any of our subgrantees, so please make sure to write this down. If you forgot your email or the email for the account has changed, please report those changes to your program manager, as Volunteer Florida will have to make those changes on your behalf. Once you're ready with your email and password, you can log in, and it will take you into the portal. On this page, you will see two tabs, Applications and Requirements. For all AmeriCorps programs, there will be no information in the Applications tab. It will remain blank throughout the year. What you will need to do is you will need to hit Requirements. Once you hit Requirements, you'll be able to see your AmeriCorps contract package and the 8 other requirements that you will need to upload at the beginning of this grant year. Some things to keep in mind are the form name, which will tell you which requirement we need from you, the project title, which is the name of your AmeriCorps program, and the due date. So as you can see here, for the 2017-2018 year, you have your AmeriCorps contract package, your vendor EFT form, a W-9, your insurance policies, audit statement, startup documents, CNCS trainings, Exhibit 3, National Service Criminal History Check, and a contract checklist. And again, all of the names are listed here under form name, again, and it follows the due dates as well. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to open your AmeriCorps contract package. It'll show the legal name of your organization, and it will also show your AmeriCorps program name. The first page is going to go through what you're going to be downloading in just a minute with all of the different exhibits. And so now you'll see this light blue hyperlink. So what you'll want to do is you will want to right click and open the link in a new tab, and you'll be able to see all of those requirements, and you can download them and save them to your personal computer. Volunteer Florida recommends that you download and save all of these requirements and exhibits and attachments now. Once you do that, you'll come back into the system and you will check this box saying that you agree that you have downloaded and saved your AmeriCorps contract agreement and its attachments as referenced above. Once you have done that, you will hit Next. And when you are ready to upload your signed AmeriCorps contract, you will simply save it to your computer and then log into MicroEdge, and you will browse where that has been saved. And you will upload it into the system, and you will want to make sure that you hit upload. And what you can see is it will give it a title name. This title name is the name that Volunteer Florida has designated it. The file name is whatever you've saved it as on your computer, the date that it was uploaded, and the size. If for some reason you uploaded the wrong document, you can hit the remove button and it will remove it for you. The maximum size for all attachments is 25 megabytes, and certain files such as .exe, .com, .bbs, or .bat cannot be uploaded. PDFs, Word documents, and Excels are the best option when uploading into MicroEdge. So once you have that ready, it's been signed by your organization's executive director or CEO, and it is ready to be sent to Volunteer Florida, you will upload it and save it, and when you are ready, you will hit review and submit. So MicroEdge likes to give you one last chance to review everything. So again, it'll go down. You'll have another chance to open your contract package and download the contract and all of its attachments. And again, if you realize that you uploaded the wrong information, it will give you a chance to edit that. But after looking at this, everything is ready for submission, so I would hit submit. And instantly you'll get a little red notification that says, thank you, your report has been submitted. You should receive an email shortly. So once you complete your contract package and you upload that for Volunteer Florida, you'll start working on the 8 other requirements that are needed for the startup year. Again, each form will let you know your AmeriCorps program name, just to make sure that you're working in the right requirement. And for the vendor EFT form, the first page is just a reminder to upload your Exhibit 10, the vendor EFT form, on the next page. So you'll simply hit next. And again, you will fill out this paper and you will save it to your computer. You will either scan it in or save it to your desktop, and then you will hit browse to find where that information has been saved on your personal computer, and you will want to upload that into the system. Again, you want to make sure that you hit upload. And again, you'll be able to see the title name, the name that you've provided for it, and the date that it was uploaded. And again, all attachments, the maximum upload can be 25 megabytes. And again, PDF, Word, and Excel work best when trying to upload into the MicroEdge system. But let's say right now you're not ready to upload all of these documents. You can hit Save and Finish later, and it will take you back to the home page. And as you can see, the vendor EFT form is no longer in the list of new requirements. So what you can do is when you're ready to upload it, you will hit In Progress Requirements. And you'll be able to go back in and upload and submit your final vendor EFT form. So when you're in your requirements, there are 3 areas where you can review the different types of requirements. A new requirement means that Volunteer Florida has just sent this to you and you've not opened it to look at it yet. So again, it is going to show under New Requirements. If you've opened a requirement but you saved and finished later, or you backed out without saving your work, the information will be saved in progress. And you'll be able to see all of the different forms that you have opened or started but have not yet actually submitted to Volunteer Florida. And then all of the information that you've submitted will be saved here as well. So again, it'll show the date that it was submitted, the due date, and the different form names that correspond with your AmeriCorps program. And if for some reason you want to double check what you've submitted, you can easily open it, and it will give you an HTML version of what the report looks like. And again, those hyperlinks will still work, and up to 120 days from submission, the document that you downloaded will also be accessible as well. So those are the three areas that you'll look for your requirements. Again, if it's not been submitted, it's either going to show up in new or in progress. And then once things are submitted, you will actually get an email from MicroEdge. It's an automated email, and it comes from mail@grantapplication.com, but it will say from Volunteer Florida. Again, this is an automated system, but we've had it changed to show that it's Volunteer Florida. We recommend that you do keep these emails as proof of submission, and you will get an email that says, thank you for your submission. Your report has been submitted successfully, and it will provide a tracking number. This tracking number is really important, so if something was submitted but for some reason isn't showing up on our side, we're able to track it down. So again, Volunteer Florida recommends that you keep these emails as proof of submission just in case. And again, the email will show you everything that you submitted. It'll give you the link for your contract package, and it will also show you the different PDF and Word documents that you've uploaded and provided to Volunteer Florida.